we are going to continue on with the next key in awakening, which is um, the locations of an awakened being. And one of the guys, Jeffrey Martin, uh, interviewed lots of people who actually have become awakened from different faiths, and he found out what is the commonality between all of them. And you wouldn't believe it, one of them is a bad memory. So there you go. So maybe I'm getting that. But yeah, so I'm going to just get the slideshow up. What Jeffrey Martin was an amazing fellow. He was very, very interested in awakening. And what he did was he went and, yeah, it's an intricate story, but he eventually went around interviewing as many people as he could who he believed was awakened. And this is from all different traditions. So there were Eastern traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, um, all the Eastern traditions, Christian, Catholic type traditions, as well as a lot of people who just spontaneously awaken with no particular tradition behind them at all. And he interviewed them and tried to find out what was common between all of them. Now, one of the things which I particularly like and says a lot is when people reach that stage of awakening and you say, what was it like? People are like, well, I don't know. It's hard to describe. And it's sort of beyond words and it's beyond concepts. And this was common throughout all of these traditions. It was one of the most common things. And so what that means is that when you have an awakened mind and you feel into that state, which is universal and part of all of us, it's not part of the thinking mind. So in the last two sessions, I've sort of been at pains to sort of point out that we want to quieten our mind to the point where our mind gets still. And if your mind is still, you're not actively thinking, but there's still something there. And it's that mystical, magical thing that I call awareness, which is in essence sort of the foundation of awakening. And all of these people described this, well, it's beyond this and it's transcendental to this. Um, and so they describe this same thing. Now, when that also tells me that often we'll get quite zealous religious types who say, I know what God is, and I know what the transcendent is, and I know what nirvana is. And the very fact that they say that really implies that they're not awakened because of the very fact that if you think you can describe something, then it's a product of your thought. And if it's a product of your thought, you've not arrived yet. So Jeffrey called it non-symbolic experience. And so the mind works on symbols and or thoughts. So um, everything. So for example, we can taste a banana and everyone knows what the taste of a banana is. But as soon as you try to describe it or objectify it, you're actually you're turning it into a symbol. So yes, information can come through the five senses. When I meditate, I can feel breathing in. But if I actually think of it, right, that's the in-breath, that is a symbolic thought. And so what Jeffrey found was that people went to this state which was non-symbolic, which is just another word of saying, another way of saying, which I keep saying all along, is experiencing the world still through the five senses and maybe even the sixth, which is a mind sense, but without conceptual thought going along. And so that was the basis of his I guess this awakening process is this non-symbolic thought, symbolic experience. Now, we all, including each of you, will definitely have had experiences of non-symbolic thought. So we all have it. However, that mind is pretty keeps going and going and going. So there's not many gaps. And as soon as there's a gap of non-symbolic thought, it's generally followed up by symbolic thought, and we kind of don't give it any heed. We don't pay it enough attention, etc. But when the day comes and you guys awaken, sort of thing, or you're able to, let's say we abide in that non-symbolic thought, you'll realize, wow, I've actually had flashes of this throughout my life. So that's what that was, type of thing. And so uh, in in Jeffrey's work, he says not only is there non-symbolic thought, but the meditator is able to create a persistent non-symbolic thought. So PNSE. So he actually created his website, and his website was pnse.com. So persistent non-symbolic thought. That's actually how he originally presented it. But then he wanted, I guess, to make it more user friendly. And the other thing which is common and which is the reason we would want to become awakened is because it's great well-being. So on the first night, I said we're all on a journey from suffering to well-being. Yeah, we're all on a journey from, you know, a compulsive mind that keeps thinking about negative things to a mind which is happy, healthy, loving, and he describes this as well-being. And the word fundamental means it's coming from the inside. Inside, it's like it's there all along. It's part of you. So again, I draw back to that discussion that I said, you know, in one meditation experience, I had this enormous feeling of joy. And that's when I suddenly realized that happiness comes from within. And so the continuum of fundamental well-being is the ability to access this state of fundamental well-being in oneself. And that's a lot more kind of user friendly than a PNSE. Okay. And so, uh, yeah, when he sort of went out to write a book or teach other people, he would use this word fundamental well-being. So Jeffrey created a course on fundamental well-being, but in interviewing all of these people, he noticed that the majority of them were well, he noticed trends. So someone in America would describe the same as someone in India as a Hindu, who would describe the same as someone in Australia who was in a Druid sect or something like that. And so he started to group them, and he grouped these experiences into buckets. He said, you know, this cohort of people seem to have similar experience. They're like in one bucket, and another group had a different experience, and they're in another bucket, and another bucket, and another bucket. And then he came up with four main buckets and then a few outliers, right? And these buckets became locations. and they became a continuum of locations of where people end up. And he noticed that there was a deepening in fundamental well-being going from one bucket to the next. Yeah. Even though they all had persistent non-symbolic experiences, they had different experiences. But these different experiences weren't all to do with, say, all the Hindus had one experiences and all the Buddhists has another experience and all the agnostics had another experience. No, in fact, there would be all four locations within each of these traditions. So it just shows in any one tradition, there's a potential to awaken your mind, but then different people awaken or go to different locations or further along. And so there is a continuum. Location one is a lighter state of well-being compared to location two, compared to location three, compared to location four. Now, there are further locations, but they are a lot more rare, although they're getting less rare these days as people practice and are taught how to get to these locations. But they also probably don't um, interest us much at this stage, because for us, just getting to location one or location two is amazing. It will completely transform your life. And after all, that's kind of like the first step to, uh, you know, go to further locations. Now, it is possible that people awaken their mind over a period of maybe days or weeks or months, and then they sort of end up in a later location. But the majority tend to go one, two, three, four, and go through it that way. But depending on the amount of work you've done on yourself, it is possible to jump to these locations. So that's what I want to go through tonight. Is let's talk about what someone might experience when they awaken. And once you're awakened, it's possible to go deeper. And what might you experience if you go deeper into that awakening? So, any questions on that process so far? All right, ready to jump in? So, all right, location one, a sense of background peace. Now, let's compare this to a person which is more compulsive in their mental nature. And someone who's not on the continuum is always worried that something is going to go wrong, that it's like a juggling act. We've got to get the kids okay. We've got to make sure that we don't lose our job and that we're good at job. We've got to keep our health okay. We've got to keep the wife happy. We've got to keep our body healthy. And you never know what's going to slip up. You know, any minute now, suddenly the finances are going down, or you've got a problem with your back, or one of the kids has a problem, or something like that. It's almost like sensing that there's this sort of, I don't know, deep chasm below us, and we've got to walk along the tightrope and make sure we don't fall off. And that's a very, very stressful way of living. Does anyone sort of resonate for this kind of ongoing anxiety of what might happen if we don't keep our life together? So that is how a lot of people in this world live their life, the whole of their life. When you get to location one, there's a real shift in attitude that deep down, I'm okay. That deep down, there's a part of me that is is okay. There's not a problem, you know. Uh, Even if my truck breaks down and my wife leaves me and I get sick, I'm still here. Like I'm still alive, and that's okay. And it's almost like a trust in the universe that awareness is still here. Awareness is never going to leave me, and that's the most important thing in the world. And therefore, uh, things are okay. And some of these people even believe that even death is okay. Yeah, it's just a natural process. It's okay. You know, and so there's this fundamental okayness. We feel okay even when things start going wrong. Now, I will say that it's possible for people to get to this stage. And then if they really do have a hard time in life, they get knocked off the continuum and then they start worrying again. But while they're in this zone, they feel, even though they can be stressed out on the surface, deep down they feel it's going to be okay. So a foundational sense of peace um, is is feeling. Sorry, I have to just drag something around the screen. Yeah, so providing a steady undercurrent of well-being. There is a reduction in thoughts here, but it's not like you get rid of thoughts at this stage. That's more stage 3 and 4. But there's sort of like a 70 to 80%. When you're not stressing out so much, when you relax in the evening, your mind doesn't whir. It's just kind of more peaceful and relaxed. So compared to someone who's a frantic thinker, their thoughts would reduce by probably 70 to 80%. Now, if you're on location 1, when those thoughts come back, it's like a feeling of, you feel the sense of worry, and you maybe can't feel in contact directly with that background piece, but you sort of know it's there. And you know that give it enough time, I'll sort of fall back into that state. Or maybe you can feel it. It's like I I'm worrying because this has happened in my life and this has happened in life, but I know deep down I'm not actually worrying. There's a deep down sense that it's going to be okay. So those thoughts temporarily can obscure this fundamental well-being. This peace reliably resurfaces without effort, and there's a noticeable reduction in thoughts. As well as this, because we're starting to resonate with awareness, we stop worrying about our story. So often, a lot of the thoughts are our story. Oh, yeah, this might happen to me, and then if people don't like me, what's going to happen? If people at work don't like me or my family doesn't like me, how am I going to create my story to be a positive one? When you feel that there's a sense of fundamental okayness, no matter what your story is, you don't worry so much about your story. And as a result, you tend to stop, you tend to have less fixation on your personal story. And when that happens, your identity starts to soften. Yeah. So the other thing that happens here is, as well as not being that interested in your own story, you tend to be less interested in stories in general. So when people want to give you their life stories, some of you may already be bored by other people's life stories. It's like, yeah, okay, you did this and you did that. Yeah, I know. But are you a good person? That's what I really want to know. I don't really care about all these stories you give me. Not only do you sort of lose interest in stories of other people, you tend to lose interest in stories full stop. So, for example, you may sort of not watch as many movies anymore because you kind of like, all the movies, they follow the hero's journey. There's always there's always usually a pretty common story arc that people like in movies. You know the hero's going to win in the end in most movies, and you're just not into stories anymore. You'd rather just be and stay in this sense of fundamental well-being. And the sense of fundamental well-being is kind of amplified by the five senses. So when you go for a walk in the forest or when you go for a walk along the beach, just being out in nature deepens you into that state of fundamental well-being, and you find a sort of a beauty in that peacefulness and that natural quality of beauty. And because you're not thinking as much, it tends to enter more. So in normal thinking, if I say to you, concentrate on your breath, um, you'll be going, okay, I'm concentrating on my breath. I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out and I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. Even just doing that, most of it is mental concepts. The word breathing in and breathing out is a mental construct. And so if I say to feel your breath, you know, yeah, I can feel the coldness and the pressure on my nose while I'm breathing in. Chuladasa talks about this in The Mind Illuminated. Probably you're only those sense precepts are only kind of about 5 or maybe less than 5%, maybe 10%, I don't know, of your mind activity around breathing in and breathing out. Most of the time, we are living in a world of symbolic representation, a symbolic experience, and we're actually sensing our five senses very, very little, though some is coming through to our mind. And that's where the richness of life lies. And when the mind drops down, more of that richness comes through in the form of the five senses. So, yeah, so we gain interest into just pure experience and we lose interest in stories. And so sometimes, interestingly enough, Jeffrey met people who described this exact thing. And he said, oh, so, so it sounds like you're in fundamental well-being. You're on the continuum of fundamental well-being. They say, no, 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 I've not awakened. He says, yeah, that definitely sounds like it. And they'll say, no, but I've been like this all my life. And so it's possible for people to actually go into fundamental well-being at an early age. Maybe even we were born naturally into this state anyway, and maybe some people never actually really got out of it. But for the majority of us, our mind takes over and we fall out of fundamental well-being. But there are people who either recapture it, maybe in their teens and or early childhood, and live this whole way. And because that is their experience, they're like, well, don't you feel like, everything's going to be okay? I mean, Mandy, what do you think? Like, do you think there's going to, Ellie, I would have thought I thought you all just thought like me, you know? And so, yeah. And so Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's mum was one of these people. So Jeffrey's mum was a devout Catholic, and she believed that God would look after her. Right from the young age when she was baptized, she always trusted in God. And as a result, she had this sense of fundamental well-being. She just assumed that everyone in the world, actually, she assumed that everyone that was baptized had this same fundamental sense of okayness. And so Jeffrey was like, yeah, it's an interesting story in the book if you go to read it, and I'll show you the book in a minute, a little later, or one of the books. Any questions so far about location one, a sense of background piece? Sound good? All right. So if we so some people land in location two, or some people after a time in location one will deepen and go into a state of um, location 2, where this fundamental well-being comes to the fore. Yeah, it's sort of is not only in so in location 1, like you're stressed. Sometimes you can be stressed for quite a long time, but deep down you know things are okay. In location 2, it's very much front of mind. You just really feel fundamentally okay all the time. So a feeling of peace and safety become more continuous and reliable. The sense of well-being moves from the background to the foreground and becomes more dominant. And now this is the real, one of the big, how can I say it, uh, things of location 2, the way we identify uh, location 2 is a sense of non-duality. Now, who's heard of non-duality before and who knows what it means? What does it mean, Lisa?
Oh God, you're gonna put me on the spot now. I mean, apart from what I can read on your screen, um, I to me it's the understanding that we're not separate, no matter what the other object is, whether that's a tree or a person or a rock, and
Yeah,
that therefore everything is as valuable.
yeah,
Not that valuable is the right word, but you get my picture.
yeah. So people describe it. I'm one with the universe, you know. Yeah, I'm one with all living beings. People describe it glibly as that, but that is it. We start to feel like there's no separation between me and the outside world. There's a sense of unity with all things. It's like, well, I am the life that flows in everything. And I just happen to be looking out of these eyes. But I don't see this body as separate from the rest of the world. The body is still part of the world. And then who am I? Well, I am this world. So, yeah, it's a sense of non duality. And this is really strong in location 2. Um, and yeah, so overall feeling experience becomes noticeably more peaceful. Thoughts have reduced by now about 90 to 95%. Most of the time, there's a tendency to go back to no thought. You sort of, yeah, thoughts will come when you need them, but there's no more sitting on the lounge and just starting to whir in your mind. Your mind naturally goes to that state of peace and a feeling of oneness with everything. Not really interested in stories anymore. Um, it is still highly functional because there's still a recognition that you can do things in the world and that you can act. In the later sort of locations, particularly location 4, the peace is so great that there's very little motivation to really want to do anything. So yeah, so some people, even though they have access to deeper locations for conducting life, they might actually come back to this location. So some people have the ability after you have experienced fundamental well-being, and sometimes you get stuck in a place, but that's only for a time. Gradually you learn to work with it, and then once you've got some experience, people say they can shift location, states of location. Um, so yeah, the thing is there's a sense of emptiness and spaciousness. So there's really this sense of emptiness, which the Buddhists and that talk about. Um, yeah, that everything is spacious. Like even solid objects, they're like made of energy. They're me. They're like a projection. They're like an illusion. They're, everything is just floating. Everything is very ethereal. Yeah. Everything is spacious, and I am not different from anything else. And that nature some would describe as consciousness. So that nature is consciousness and everything is consciousness. Because I think we described before that everything actually is consciousness. Like what you're looking at, you're not looking at me. You are looking at consciousness, which is being created in your mind. I think we talked about that last week. How light comes in through your eyes along the optic nerve, and you're actually creating an internal map, which is used to represent what you think is happening outside. But you have no proof that the outside actually exists, because you are definitely only looking at consciousness. That's the only thing you can look at. So yeah, so everything could be consciousness. We don't know, but it's intimately related. Any questions on location 2? Alrighty, let's go to location 3. So now with location 3, the positive emotion emerges. Oh, in location 2, we have access to different emotions, but very rarely do we have negative emotions. Now, in location 3, those positive emotions all seem to merge into one single emotion. And when asked to describe that single emotion, people on location 3 will say it's a kind of love, joy, compassion, happiness. So it's sort of like several emotions, but they describe it as kind of one emotion that is sort of everything together. Now, the other thing they describe it often as is sacredness. Um, yeah, so, and sacredness, I've got that there. Uh, but interestingly enough, this is deeper in the sense of well-being, but actually the sense of self returns. So this sacredness, this joy, has to sort of have a location, this ongoing sense. Whereas previously it was vacuous and spacious. Now there's a definite sense of love or joy or sacredness. And one tends to then uh, have this kind of separation because this feeling is sort of here and it's not over there. But one feels that one is connected with something, and this is in the like Christian, Catholic, the what is it? The religions which have a God, this is kind of like the end point. This is that which they describe and try to sort of get you to, because people in those traditions will often describe it as I feel one with God, and God is all loving and all, and so with this I feel one with, there's that sense of separation. So in level 3, the separation has returned, but the fundamental well-beingness has deepened because there's this sense of being connected to something greater than you that is all loving, all pervasive, all powerful, that sort of thing. Now, if you're not of a particular tradition, or like especially one which has a god associated with it, then if you're a Buddhist, you'll say, I've merged with emptiness, and emptiness is compassionate and loving. And if you're not even that, if you're agnostic, then you'll describe it as I've merged with the universe, and the universe is made of pure love. So those are the kind of descriptions that Jeffrey was getting from some people, that he would put into this bucket of location 3, one positive emotion. With this, emotional reactivity fades to almost nothing. Well-being intensifies. Sense of personal narrative quietens. Life feels effortless. Life feels that if you're connected to the source, then all you need to do is relax into that source, and life will just flow effortlessly. And it's like if something bad happens to you, you're not worried because that's how it's meant to be. There's a sense of, well, it's meant to be, you know? Um, I'm going back to source, that sort of thing. So that's one positive emotion. Any questions on location 3? So location 4, again, there's a sense of a loss of separation. And yeah, in the Christian traditions, this can be a source of very deep confusion because God disappears. You are one with God, and then suddenly God disappears. There's no God. There's not even God anymore. So that can be quite confronting to people in certain particular traditions. Um, but then there's also no you, and there's no agency. There's no one to decide what to do anymore. There's just nothing anymore. There's no God. There's no direction in life. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. You just, it's like you still do stuff, you still eat, but it's like you don't decide to eat. The body just eats when it's hungry. You don't seem to do anything at all. You just abide. Yeah, so there's no agency, there's no emotions, there's basically no conceptual experience. So when the body is hungry, it eats, and you sort of note that from a sort of a very distant shore. You just don't think about it. The thing is, you're not even thinking about this stuff. You're not even thinking, oh, that's strange, there's no agency. You're just not thinking anymore. No conceptual experience. This can be very disruptive in a person's life because there's a lack of motivation. There's no reason to do anything anymore. Um, but there's deep conscious integration. There's no more stories in your head. Everything just disappears. Um, yeah, experience becomes non-conceptual and direct. Reality is just, there's no time. People here will say, no, well, there's no actual time. Time doesn't exist. Reality is all just occurring in the present moment. There's no filtering layer of concepts and labels. All those labels fall away. Um, yeah. So you can pretty much stay in this state for a year and 2 years before, you know, something happens and you either go back to an earlier layer, or actually you can actually proceed to a later layer and get some sense of perspective again, and then actually become more functional again when you get into layers 5 or 6, which we're not going to talk about, I don't think. Well, I will. So after location 4, there are further locations, which were very, very rare, according to Jeffrey. But moving out of location 4 um, involves a significant and uncommon shift that feels like crossing a chasm, was some of the descriptions. Also, at this stage, there's generally 2 paths he talked about. There's a path in which you sort of realize that life is about sorry, I'm losing my voice here. Re-engaging with humanity. He calls it the path of humanity. And then there's another path, which is like the path of, I think he called it this path of spirit, which is going deeper into this state of being one with the universe and one with spirit. So um, but the sense of identity really never comes back after stage 4. It's just that you naturally you you're there. You might as well. It doesn't matter what you do at this stage, so you can't really lose really this sense of deep fundamental well-being. So you might as well help others. So there's a sense of re-engaging with others, and it actually often depends on the momentum that you've built up previous to going into these deep locations. So, as an example, and this is really quite interesting, is in the Tibetan tradition, there's something called bodhicitta, which just basically means loving kindness. And for the first like 15 years of a monk's life, they spend many, many times making a vow to save all beings. May I achieve enlightenment to be able to help all beings. And it's said that that vow helps one progress along the path. But interestingly enough, it also, I believe, helps at this stage when if you do get to this stage, then the momentum of this kind of promise and this loving kindness that you've built up over time carries you into being of service to others and wanting to help others after all your problems disappear for yourself. Anyway, that's just my understanding and my anecdotal evidence of why several traditions put a lot of emphasis on love and kindness, even prior to teaching deep wisdom traditions. Um, Comes with both benefits and challenges that need to be integrated. So then there are other challenges that happen beyond level 5, which we could speak about, but I won't. So so this is so these are some examples of a sort of a checklist to see where you're at. Maybe some of you guys are already on the continuum, but you don't know it. If I wanted to ask whether you're on the continuum, some questions that I would ask is, do you notice there's a steady sense of okayness in the background? You know, in that case, you possibly are in location 1. Whereas if and then if I was to ask, well, you know, is peace, safety now in the foreground with you? And are you sort of, do you feel really positive, you know, greater than 50% of the time that everything's okay and the worries really don't worry you? And also, when you look around you in location 2, the world seems flat. So it's like you're not looking at a 3D universe, you're looking at your own consciousness. And because you're looking at your own consciousness, it's as if the world sort of stops having spaciousness anymore, or spaciousness is somehow an illusion. So that's another way to check whether someone is in location 2. Location 3, do you only have access to one positive emotion? Would suggest that you're in location 3. And then location 4 has agency dropped away. And if agency has dropped away, then you're in location 4. And then do you sense that there's a further gap beyond where experience diverges would be entering into location 5? So anyone on location 1 or 2 or 3? Yep, Lisa's sort of feels okay in the background. It's actually not that uncommon that, yeah, people do have a sense. There are quite a lot of people who do have this sense of, yep, everything's going to be okay. It'll all work out. And they may already be in location 1. Right. Oh, any questions? You're free to ask questions. I love questions. Yeah.
I don't know. How do I
So,
say? How do I say this without being clumsy? To talk about locations and stuff in a conversation like this is really excellent. But also, it would be easy to assume that the person in the location, like, what effort are they doing? What are they engaging with daily? Like, are they still? Some people would they get there just naturally because, you know, that's just the environment that they've grown up in and they're naturally wired towards, you know, finding safety, and other people, I'm guessing, would have to work harder at it. And that even the lady, even Jeffrey's mum, who believed that when she, because she got baptized, I guess that's still effort, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's still.
No, not really. I would say Jeffrey's mum just kind of happened onto it. I don't. Just let me take a minute and see if I can find the book. It's out in my shed in my retreat stuff, because I usually take it on retreat with me. So I'm sorry I haven't got it to show you on the screen. So Jeffrey found that of the people he interviewed, around 70% of them just out of the blue had a sort of a sudden experience and become awakened. And it was just all over the shop. Some people had been religious since childhood. Other people didn't have a religious bone in their body. And just one day they just boom, like that. There's stories, if you look in the archives too, there's stories of people having these religious experiences in the most strangest of places. One really common place, which isn't possibly quite as strange as it might seem when you think about it, is during war, in the middle of a fight. So even like these soldiers in the, maybe in the times before guns, where charging into battle on horseback with a sword, would have these religious experiences, in the middle of battle, and even people, in war. And I think there's something about knowing that your life could end literally any second, uh, can sort of push you into some of these locations. But other people, it happens more gradually with practice. So, and like I said, some people have just always been that way right from childhood, and other people have to work at it and they don't get into these locations until later. And then most of us never really experience even location one. So uh, there's randomness. Now, the book I wanted to show you is called The Finders, because that's another word. Is we talk about religious seekers, people who are seekers. We're seekers on the path. And yeah, so there's that seeker mentality. But when someone finds fundamental well-being, it's like, I know it's there. Like, maybe I can't access it all the time, but I know that fundamental now being is now within me. Like, I can access it at any time no, not at any time I want to, but I just know it's there. Yeah, there it is on Lisa's phone. Yep. So, um, so at that point, when you suddenly realize, I don't need to go and find a teacher, I don't need to go and find a religion, I don't need to go and find, I don't need to seek out this holy grail of nirvana. It's right here. At that moment, you become a finder. And so that was another word commonly used, is if you're into fundamental well-being, then you found it. So you're a finder. And so his book was called The Finders. And it's really a description of his experience. He explained how he came about to do the study, how he did the study, what he looked for, and sort of his findings in the study. And he goes through and sort of explains the different locations in this study. So it's called The Finder's Book. Yeah, I would highly recommend it to you to read if you're interested in that sort of thing. Um, the other thing is, he went on and decided to do a course. Oh, so the other thing that he asked all these people were, what practices were you doing, and what particular practices seem to make your transition from being a seeker to a finder? And he would get lists of different practices and ones that seem to work better than others from, I believe, over 1,000 people that he talked to. Yeah. And basically, there were some common themes in the practices that people did to become awakened. Now, would you like to know what those practices are? It would be good, wouldn't it? So he put together a course of sort of the most common 10 practices that seemed to have the biggest chance or was happened to awaken the most amount of people, and therefore were the most common way for people to awaken. Now, these practices are quite different. So some people awaken in all different sorts of ways. So some of them are very meditation based. Some are very much loving kindness based. Some are insight type practices. Some are religious, others are non religious. So uh, there, you, there was no sort of holy grail. And I think that's one thing you need to take out of it is you have to tread your own path and you have to find the practices that work for you. Just because something worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But still, we're all human beings, and it's better to try practices which seem to have worked for quite a lot of people because there's a higher chance they might work for us. And so he called that the Finder's Course. And it was a 3 to 4 month course. And he took people through that course, and he was blown away by the success rate that he had. It was something like 50 or 60% went to location one, which, when you think about, you know, awakening, my vision of awakening was there was only ever one person that ever got awakened, and that was the Buddha. So to know that you can do a course and sort of 50% of the people will kind of awaken at least to location one is an incredible, amazing insight and epiphany for me. Um, so he did that with this data, and he put the Finder's Course together. Then he found that, um, you know, people really wanted to become enlightened. They really liked the idea of, um, you know, having never ever having suffering again and always being, you know, being one with God. That was appealing to a lot of people, but it obviously wasn't appealing enough because there were very few people that wanted to pay the money or do 3 months worth of work to get there. They're like, yeah, I'd like that. I'll bit busy now, but one day I'll do it. This is a bit of a common theme, isn't there? So uh, he actually worked with another guy who shortened it to a 45-day course. And so there's a 45-day Finder's Course that you can do out there online, and you can find it. Now, the uh, the uh, the 3 month course is not really available anymore. But I have access to it because I just find it more powerful than doing the short little 45-day course. So in the mentor program, we spend three to 4 months on these practices in the Finder's Course. But again, I don't want anyone looking at this to feel like, you know, um, you have to do anything with me. So I want you to know that even if, even if you feel like you don't resonate with me per se, there are the course is out there for you to do, and you can do with other people. So for you guys, or potentially if other people are looking at the recording of this, um, then you definitely can do this by yourself and go out and find that course if this resonates to you, but you're not sort of resonating with doing the course. But of course, if you want to do the mentor program, then part of it is to do the much longer. It's a bit more stretched out, but I feel it's more powerful doing it that way, the 3 month course. So yeah, so I pay for that for you, and that's part of the course that I do when I do the 2 year mentoring program. Um, yeah, so that was really a brief introduction into what is it like to be an awakened person, Where do they come from? Which tradition do they come from? I.e., the answer is everywhere. What practices did they do? Well, it could be anything, but there is also some science in there are some practices that do seem to work better than others. And also, if we do get into fundamental well-being, it's a getting to be a fairly well mapped out territory. And by understanding this, it gets you ready so that you're because some of these places, as I've said, are a bit freaky. They're a bit strange, and you may pull back, and you may pull back too early. So a good friend of mine in Perth actually had a Kundalini awakening and it freaked her out. And so she pulled back from that experience and sort of pulled back into everyday life, didn't want to do any meditation or anything like that because this experience freaked her out a little bit. Whereas it's a bit of a shame because, in a way, that was an opening for her to go to a deeper level and potentially find states of ongoing happiness. But she didn't have anyone to speak to. She was completely ignorant. She knew nothing, and so it was a bit strange. So the mind sort of pulls back. And if any of you are worried about some of these locations, for the most part, especially if you know about them, but in any case, generally you don't get forced into these locations. You choose to go into them. So there's no danger really in falling into, say, a sense of non agency. And then, well, you wouldn't freak out when you were there anyway, but worrying that you might freak out now thinking that you might get into this state. Anyway, so there is choice in this matter. So just to rest any nerves if people are worried about anything like that. All right. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I'll get rid of the screen share. And yeah, over to you for questions and discussion. Ellie,
It's
what do
just
you,
very intriguing looking at all the different sections that we could all fall into. And it's interesting that you say that potentially you could not even fit into one of them. Just depends on what you choose.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I think in this journey, because everyone's an individual, no two people will have exactly the same path, but there are also quite a lot of commonalities. Ego falling away, a sense of a reduction in your own self identity and more of an identity with the universe, which is common across the board. So there are ways in which we can place you more or less in a certain location, no matter what. Um, Even though your individual journey and the experiences will be quite different to, the person next to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Michelle, what? Uh,
Uh, so I was going to say the thing that I feel like I've sort of got snagged on tonight is the bit about no longer being interested in stories, like not being interested in watching films and or reading books. And I'm an avid consumer of as expressions of art and human experience and understanding the world and so I feel very but do I want that? And so again at the end I'm very pleased that you sort of said, well, you can't just fall into it. You do get there through intention. And so I'm just going to sort of spend some time thinking about, well, why has that grabbed my attention, and what does it mean, and is it what I've so but I do take on also that if you find yourself having moved into such a state, presumably you've wanted to be there, or you've had some intention to get there, and that the loss that I fear at the moment, perhaps I won't experience as loss
No, you
in
won't.
that circumstance. That's right.
No.
So I'm going to go back to it'd be all right,
Yeah.
but it doesn't sound desirable at the moment.
Well, I'll say what will happen is it'll transform. So
Yeah.
your love for stories, you will kind of, let's say as an example, I don't know if this is exactly how it might happen, but you might say, my love for stories, when I think about it deeply, is just my love for my fellow human being. That's
Yes.
why I love their stories, is because I love them. I love others. And
Yes.
now I can see that more purely. I feel more of an attachment and more of a sense of direct love to all beings and nature around me. And I see that the stories are lovely. And by the way, it's not, you're not going to hate stories. You'll still, the Buddha, he was enlightened and he used stories all the
So they
time.
seem to. I was going to say they seem to use stories a lot to get
They
their points
use
across.
stories a
These
lot.
people.
Yes, but it will be more, does the story deepen the sense of kindness and
Yeah.
love, or help, or does it actually help the other person? You
Yes.
won't get into, oh, do you know what I heard at school the other day? Well,
Yeah. Those
such and
stories.
such,
Yeah.
she's having a relationship with such and such, and
Yeah.
getting to
Yeah.
those kind of drama stories and
Yes.
and
Yes.
let me tell you a story about, my kids love these Marvel movies and
Oh
these
yeah.
hero movies, and
Yep.
I'm just not interested in them. Why? Because it's all the same story. The superhero
Yes.
gets up,
Yes.
the bad person comes
Yep.
down,
Yep.
the superhero,
Yep. Yep.
so it will
Yep.
transform. It won't,
Mm.
you won't,
Mm.
yeah, you won't miss it when you're there. You'll find,
Mm.
and you will still be
Mm.
able to tell stories. There's not taking that away or anything like that. Yeah.
I also, have been trying to follow an interest in art, like experiencing art, like going to exhibitions and galleries and not trying to overthink it, but just
Exactly.
experience it.
Yeah.
And so I think that, so my suspicion is that feels like a pathway to some degree of awakening, is how how you engage with art, perhaps.
Correct. Yeah.
No.
No, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
these are things I'm going to be thinking about after tonight's session.
Good job. All right. Mandy, Kylie, anyone else? Yeah.
Hey, Peter. I kind of see it, and after Michelle's comments, it's again, it's the attachment and aversion, like to be able to look at art without judgment, to be able to look at art without I like it, I don't like it. It's irrelevant whether you like it or not. We're experiencing something that someone else has created, and whether we're attached or averse to it doesn't is just going to cause us grief and anxiety. So it's that judgment, letting go of the judgment to be able to have that fundamental okayness. I guess I grew up, with some people being glass half empty, some people glass half full. Fundamental okayness, like in stage 1 is, well, the glass is full and we will be okay. And, if not being okay, it's just the label that we put on it, disease or injury or accidents are maybe what is supposed to happen to us. And it's our aversion to being in those situations that make it not okay. So again, it's just that attachment to being successful and happy and healthy and wealthy. Yeah, 2 ways to get what you want. Keep striving and never get there, or want less. So we're
Yeah.
going to want less. Yeah, no, it's been very interesting. Thank you. And thank you,
Yeah.
everyone else, for your insights.
Yeah, no, that's great. Kylie, you want to say anything, or we can leave it there?
Peter, it's just a question.
Mm.
When this process is happening, do you find, like with our value systems, that actually has an indication of how people will go in, whether they go into location 1, 2, or 3, etc.? Does that make sense?
Well, values certainly change when you go into
Yeah.
these, but no, I don't think so, because like the interesting thing is that there's very, there's kind of bad people, or Jeffrey found people who went into fundamental well-being who before fundamental well-being were just really probably pretty nasty people, selfish people. And then they suddenly went into this state, and then they sort of just gave it all up, and then just didn't. But they didn't actually necessarily get good either.
Mm.
They just didn't bother anymore.
Okay.
So what would cause someone to go directly into stage 2 rather than stage 1? My only possibly if you've done a fair bit of purification work, like through NLP, or potentially if you're already like, for example, location 2 is this idea of unity with all things. And there are people who I've met that have clearly got a lot of negative emotions, but nevertheless, they believe in this unity. They go, oh, we are all one being. So, yeah, potentially your beliefs might cause you to drop directly into level to location 2 rather than go through location 1. But even if you go into location 2, sometimes it's good to be able to learn how to come back to location 1 in order to eventually get fluent. It's the people who have sort of worked with this the longest, it seems to me, or maybe they're the only ones that are actually teaching out there, but they have learned to be able to sort of modulate from one location to another to suit their life. So, for example, when they go to work, as I said in the slide, that's a sort of the sweet spot. They'll go into location 2 because there's deep fundamental well-being, but they've still got a sense of motivation to do things. And then, when they're with loved ones, they'll go into location 3, and then occasionally when they want to be alone and go into meditation, if they have the ability, they might drop into location 4. So but that, I believe, does take quite a bit of practice. It's not easy to do that straight away. And if you don't know, you wouldn't even try. So you would just be in that potentially you'd be in that for the rest of your life, because you wouldn't know any other way, type of thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, then we shall wrap it up for the evening. And so, yeah, I again apologize for being a bit late, but I'm so glad that you were all there to see me when I finally logged on. And yeah, I hope this has been interesting, and I look forward to seeing you next week, when we're actually going to look at the more traditional way of achieving fundamental well-being through the path of insight. So this is really the classical teachings of insight, and in particular from the Buddha, he talks about something called the 3 characteristics. So we're going to learn about 3 characteristics, and I know, Michelle, we did that on retreat once, so we'll have a look at that, as well as another couple of ways, classical ways, that have throughout history been strong triggers to trigger people into this state of awakening. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you very much. And we will have a great evening. And
Thank you.
we'll again next week. And I'll